I hope you are all having a wonderful morning. I am so excited to be bringing you this live today from Rotorua, New Zealand. I am back home and it's just great to be home. So we are chatting with Nicole Cozean from PelvicSanity, who is an absolute guru. And Nicole is based in Orange County, California in the USA. She is a physiotherapist and she's also on the board of directors of the Interstitial Cystitis Association. And she is the author of the Interstitial Cystitis Solution, which is all about a very holistic approach to the management of IC. So, hey, Nicole.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thank you. I'm very excited to be in my hometown in Rotorua in New Zealand.
Yeah,
so,
it's so cool.
I know, it's really cool. So thank you so much for joining us. I thought that what we might start with, in case some people that have tuned in don't know, could you let people know what interstitial cystitis is?
Yes, so interstitial cystitis is we used to say it was just a bladder pain condition, but now we know it's more of a pelvic pain condition that has two characteristic factors. It has urinary symptoms, so urinary urgency and frequency, along with pelvic pain. And so it's of 6 months or more of having a basically feeling like you have a UTI with no other identifiable cause. So people test negative for all of the things that they think are wrong, and then it's actually so then everybody's like, well, what the heck's going on? And then a lot of times then you can get diagnosed with interstitial cystitis at that time. So it's just a pelvic pain condition, a urinary symptom condition of frequency and urgency that's perceived to be coming from the urinary bladder.
A common and poorly spoken about, and well, in my opinion, symptom of interstitial cystitis that really impacts women's quality pain with or pain with sex. So would you be able to describe or explain to us why this bladder condition or perceived kind of symptoms coming from the bladder results or can result in pain with sex?
Yeah, the connection wrong. A lot of times, and even some patients can have, mild urinary symptoms with IC, but then painful intercourse can actually be some of the most primary symptoms. So and again, that's not something that a lot of times people think that happen together. They think that, oh, I have painful sex on this end, I have IC on this end, and then they're not really, understanding that those things are actually can go together and can actually cause one another, right? So, for instance, painful intercourse can be for a variety of different reasons, but a lot of times with most painful intercourse, whether it's coming from interstitial cystitis or another condition, actually has a hypertonic or a higher toned pelvic floor to it, right? And so we know that from the interstitial cystitis research that more than almost 90% of people with interstitial cystitis also have this hypertonic pelvic floor dysfunction. And then we know that hypertonic pelvic floor dysfunction can cause painful intercourse. And now, even if we take interstitial cystitis out of the equation, there is 75% of women will have at least one painful intercourse episode at some point in their life. And so it's not just about interstitial cystitis, but interstitial cystitis can definitely make painful intercourse more painful, more likely to you just want to avoid that whole area. One of the things that I see mostly with my patients is that, maybe they're getting better with me and with their pelvic floors, but then now they're also scared to do anything with sex, right? Because now it's like, well, it used to hurt. I don't want, you're going up there 2 times a week. I'm going up there with my wand or dilator 2 times a week, and it's just like, I don't want anything else to touch that area. Stay away, right?
Especially when you're making improvements, right? Because you're sort of like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to go back there. Like I can
don't
do
want
so
to
many
ruin
other
it.
things. Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
right? So, so that's how they're intertwined. I mean, we usually talk about it being the common denominator is some sort of pelvic floor dysfunction. And then we can talk about how if you have pelvic floor dysfunction or that higher tone pelvic floor, that can actually create bladder symptoms. It can create painful intercourse. And then bladder symptoms, urinary urgency, frequency, can also cause pelvic floor dysfunction, which can cause painful intercourse. So now you're in this like web of basically a bunch of crap things that are going on with your pelvic floor.
It's just chicken and egg. They're just sort of like playing off each other, isn't it? I sort of think about it. I was trying to describe it to one of my friends, and I was sort of saying it's like well, I sort of thought of the pelvic area and all of the sort of, you know, things that can irritate each other and sort of play off each other, as if you imagine a family of 4, say, in a car driving along, and you start off with like the younger sibling maybe annoying the other sibling in the back seat, and then all of a sudden they're fighting, and you're just like, oh, and then the driver turns around and says, you know, you guys be quiet. So suddenly 3 people are irritated, and it's just, you know, it's really hard to kind of get everything kind of calmed down in the car again.
Totally. Yeah. And to that analogy, right, you kind of have to get everybody chilled out at the same time in order for it to seem calm in the car, right? Because at that point, even getting one of your kids to be quiet, the other ones are still firing, right? So
if you're playing music and it's like really loud as well, like, which could be maybe the stress or something that's outside of your control. Like, it's just, there's so many factors, like emotions. So that's why it's really exciting that that people like you have come to treat these conditions so holistically, and seen how they all intertwine and relate with one another. And or men come to you in your clinic, what with interstitial cystitis and obviously pain with intercourse. What do you do to start off to help them, I guess?
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about first, kind of like my questions. If someone just says, oh, I have painful intercourse, then I have a lot of questions that we need to sort of clarify, because that can actually help us to differentiate, number one, which muscles might be involved, which nerves might be involved, and is there anything else going on, like vulvodynia or vaginismus or something else that can also be creating that painful intercourse. So we as PTs usually talk about it as insertional pain, or pain that happens like right as at the opening, and that might be symptoms of burning, ripping, and stuff like that. Or sometimes they might be able to insert just fine, but then it's that deeper penetration that actually is more painful. So we actually try to see, like, do you have one or the other or both, to sort of help me figure out which muscles might be a problem. So if you look at the pelvis here, and I'll try to grab the pelvis, and then we're going to be primarily talking about women, and then we'll talk a little bit about men here in a second. But so we have the pelvis here. So this area of triangle right here is more superficial pelvic floor muscles. So that means they're closer to the opening. So if you're going to try to insert something right here, and these muscles are tight, then it's going to hurt right away. Sometimes it hurts right away where it feels like it's a wall. Sometimes that tissue doesn't feel like it can stretch very well. And that's like, we call that insertional pain. So at the very beginning, so a lot of people might have that. Then if you might get past there, and that might be fine. And then if we go further in, then we might actually be having a problem with some of these muscles back here. And that's where we call, like, where we have deep pain with maybe deeper thrusting or some other types. But those are 2 separate areas of muscles that can be a problem. And then you can also just have hypersensitivity to the touch out here. So we kind of make this this sort of sign where the nerve to your pelvic floor comes around, and there's three major branches. There's one that goes to the urethra and the clitoris area. There's one that goes to the vaginal canal, and there's one that goes to the rectum. So that's like the three branches. So if you have some irritation of the nerve that goes right up to your urethra and your clitoris, then you can even have pain, not even with insertion, but you can have pain with even arousal. So you even get sexually excited, even just mentally, and your pelvic floor muscles can start to react to that. And that can actually cause nerve irritation, and there can be even pain with arousal. So those are like the three major things that we try to distinguish between. Do you have pain with arousal? Do you have pain with insertion right at the opening? Or do you have pain with deeper thrusting? And so from there, then we can kind of tailor the treatment to where we feel like we can get the most, forgive the pun, but bang for your buck, right? That's probably a bad joke, but but seriously, like we just like want to be able to target the areas that are creating the most problem. And so those are the things. So arousal, the insertion, and then the deeper penetration. And then from a symptom standpoint, there can either be the different types of symptoms can be either muscular, which is like throbbing and aching, and maybe even sharp. And then there can be nerve-like symptoms, which are more burning and ripping, and stuff like that. So typically, we also try to differentiate on symptoms too. So if you have, for instance, real sharp pain on the insertion part, then we're looking at those muscles there. If you have burning with just touch, then we might be looking for some other nerve impulses that might be going a little bit haywire there. So so those types of things to pay attention to, instead of saying like, oh my gosh, it hurts everywhere, we might want to try to break it down so that your pelvic physical therapist, or pelvic physio as you guys call them, can actually help you better differentiate like what part might be the bigger issue. So that's one thing that I want to just talk about as well. And then for men, I'll just take a little brief little talk about the men. Men basically have the same pelvic floors. Men can have IC too, almost at the same rate as females. So that's an IC myth I like to bust quite a bit. So men, the analogous things for men is they can get their arousal pain can be pain with erection. So again, they can just have pain with erection. They can have pain as the intercourse continues to go on. They can have pain with ejaculation. And then both genders can have pain after intercourse. So a couple of my IC patients actually are fine with the actual act, but then afterwards, it throws them into a huge flare. And so that can be really frustrating also, because like the act itself is okay, but then the act itself can throw you into a flare. And then for 3 days after, you're peeing every 20 minutes and, you know, you have more burning and whatever else. So, you know, that's kind of like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't at that point. So
totally.
And it can be really, really frustrating for people. And so that's the other thing. So we also ask about pain after, and how long does it last? If it's just a few minutes, that's one thing. If it's a few hours or a few days, that's another. And then also, does it exacerbate the current symptoms, right? Or is it a completely different symptom that you're feeling? So in this case with IC, it would be, so let's say someone is fine with the actual act, but they're in really bad pain afterwards, but it doesn't recreate urinary urgency. It actually recreates pelvic pain. So does it influence the urinary symptoms, or now do we have an extra irritant that the intercourse actually sort of ignited? So I hope that kind of makes sense, right? So, but those are all of the things that a pelvic physical therapist brain should be going to help you better manage those symptoms.
Just a quick question, Nicole. Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. You mentioned the in terms of the male having the sort of post intercourse symptoms. That can also happen. Like women can also tolerate, like not necessarily have pain-free but have sort of tolerable intercourse, but they can also have worsening symptoms afterwards as well, can't they? It's not
Totally.
just the men. Yeah.
Yeah, for both people, that definitely happens. So, and again, like we just ask people to pay really close attention to what actually got worse. Did the pelvic pain part get worse? Did the urethral pain get worse? Or did the urgency frequency get worse? Or both? And sometimes it's both. But those little things, even those little teeny differences that you might not think as a patient or as a person with IC that really matter to us a lot, because then it gives us clues as to what's actually what we call the pain generator. So we really want to find the why of why you have painful intercourse. Which muscle is it? Why is that muscle the one that's mad? And all of that kind of stuff. So
I'm trying to get women and men to know sort of what to expect when they come to see you in terms of what treatment you're likely to sort of, what to expect. Because I think some people are sort of like, well, what do you do? And I come and see you and you go all around down there. And I think it would be nice for people to know. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, so if we take the female pelvis again, right? So we're going to look at a pelvic physio should be actually, right? So they should be looking at your posture and all of the different things. But then the one thing that we do, and most people don't, is that we actually take an internal look at what these pelvic floor muscles are doing. So we can feel each of these muscles. So we go in for women vaginally, and then we can actually feel each of these muscles around here. And then we can go in here and we can feel each of these muscles around here, and then we can identify the ones that are potentially causing the problem. And then we have a series of techniques, mostly done with internal techniques, where we just use one, sometimes two fingers, but one, where we're actually kind of massaging the tender points or trigger points, or just helping to restore blood flow to those areas, and helping those muscles to restore their function, get better blood flow. Sometimes we're even putting a little bit of pressure on those areas to sort of reset the nervous system to not react with pain to those touches. And so we can go along there. We can do a bunch of things like that. And then we also want to look at beyond the pelvic floor, what other muscles can contribute to those painful areas. And so one of the big culprits to this is your inner thigh muscles. So your inner thigh muscles, when those muscles are real tight, which is super common with people with IC, then those muscles can feed up into the pelvic floor, especially the stuff on this outside part, because your inner thigh muscles attach right here, right to the same bone that some of your pelvic floor muscles attach to. And so your inner thighs like reflexively want to protect the area, right? They're trying to get something to not go in there if it's painful. But then that can also, right, everybody kind of gets that, like, oh, we're gripping with our inner thighs, like, oh, trying to control the depth of penetration essentially. But that can in and of itself actually create more pain and discomfort. So one of the other things that the physical therapist or pelvic physio will look at is what positions are actually what sexual positions are actually more painful or less painful, because that can also really give us some clues. So just to give you an example, so we all kind of have heard at least that in order to help the pelvic floor relax, right, we have that happy baby position, right, where both of our thighs are up. So in my sessions, sometimes I'll find a tender point of those areas, and then I will put their leg up in that position to see if the tension on the pelvic floor changes at all. So number one, that can be used as a stretch to help, or number two, if someone's going to try to attempt intercourse, then maybe that might be a good position to start the insertion with, right, is with that one knee up, the other knee up, or something like that. So we can also work with positions of intercourse that are going to help that that pelvic floor relax and not freak out so much.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of being able to still be intimate with your partner and
Yeah.
not flare things up and worsen symptoms, which is obviously what you're not wanting to do.
Absolutely. And then that's the other thing. I love that you mentioned partners, because no matter what gender your partner is, it's really important for that conversation to happen between the two of you guys. And so, I bring partners into the clinic quite often, if nothing else, to just get, someone else to talk about that. Yes, this is a thing. Here, this is like what, this is what contributes. No, it's not just somebody trying to avoid something. So sometimes it helps to have like a third party to say that instead. And then we can give the partners a job to do to help with the whole process. We can have maybe a little bit of inner thigh massage before, which, can kind of get you in the mood a little bit, but also it can also help with the relaxation, making the person that's it feels safe, making your little pelvic floor muscles feel safe. And when they feel safe and that they're not going to get bombarded with something that they don't want, then they'll also be a little bit more susceptible to stretching out and relaxing, and your nervous system then won't be so reactive. And then we can have the partners do a lot of like different holding with the legs, for instance, to make people feel more comfortable. And then just communication between you and your partner as well is super important. And sometimes what I tell my patients is like, hey, like if we start an activity, we might end it, buddy, you know? So so I think that's an important thing to also be able to have the comfort and safety to know that like I can stop this at any time, and have the person understand that. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe next time we'll go a little bit further. We'll try a different technique, but it doesn't have to be like right now. So let's talk a little bit about home program and stuff too, because once it's, I'm working so I'm working with people, once, maybe twice a week with IC and painful intercourse. And that's just not enough time to get floor to do what we need it to do and stuff like that. So there's a couple different things that I will give my patients. So obviously we give like the stretches both externally and like the pelvic floor drop stretches and stuff, which are in my book, the Interstitial Cystitis Solution, and then on our website and all that kind of stuff. But what I really want to focus on is how you can keep doing essentially what we do in the clinic at home. And so one of those ways is with a wand or a tool that looks sort of like this, and it has a tapered end. It also has a rounded end. This one is their wand, which is like right down the street from us. Actually, they're in San Diego, which is kind of cool. But there's other ones that look like this too. So this is a tool, and it's curved, right? So that we can actually insert it, and then we can actually feel and use the pelvic floor. I don't know if this is going to be able to get seen, right? But we can actually use this wand, and then we can move it in the direction of how we would be using it in the clinic, right? So that's another really good way that you can keep doing what we're doing in PT and making those gains while you're not in our office. And so one of the big things that I teach, which is also in the IC Solution book, is, and it's not just for me, but most people talk about the clock and the pelvic clock, where 12 o'clock is up towards the pubic bone, 6 o'clock is down towards the tailbone. And then I like to talk about things in different depths, right? So about something that correlates to that first part of your finger here with that first bend is more of like the superficial muscles. The second knuckle is about that middle layer, and then all the way to this knuckle is like the third layer. So basically that kind of corresponds to the depth of the wand, right? So you're basically never going much past this, but the curve actually helps you to get to the side wall, because remember, you're not actually treating the vagina, you're actually treating the pelvic muscles of the wall of the pelvis through the vaginal canal. So we need to actually turn and like get them pressed on, you know, mildly. It shouldn't be painful, right? It might be slightly uncomfortable, but we're just getting a little bit of input to the muscles there, so that, and then we work on our breathing and our stretching and working on the leg position and stuff in order to get that to go. So that's really good for if you have trigger or tender points, or you need to like do a little bit of pressure modalities there to help your nervous system. And then the other thing that we have for if you have really insertional pain, then we have dilators, these little guys.
Yeah.
And these happen to be Sole Source dilators. I personally love Sole Source. We recommend Sole Source to our patients. What I really like about them is that they're silicone, and so they're kind of bendy, so they're a little less like freaked out. Some of them are plastic and kind of hard, and so I kind of feel like that's counterintuitive and counterproductive, and that's not like what we're going to be doing, right? So, and these ones can be real small. So, and this is really good for just being able to insert in, working on just non-painful insertion, getting used to something around that area. Sometimes people that are really, really anxious about doing that, I'll have people just like hold it and touch it down there. Don't even worry about inserting it. There's a lot of ways that we can work with somebody, even if any sort of insertion is painful. So again, yeah, and I love that Pelvic Wad said, you know, it shouldn't be painful. This is a big thing, right? If you have painful intercourse, I do not want to create more pain for you. That is not what we're doing. So, well, it might be slightly uncomfortable potentially at the very beginning. We should be able to find a position and a pressure that is going to be very tolerable for you, and it should not reintroduce that pain. We are not asking people to like jam this wand or these dilators into your pelvic floor. What we're asking you to do is to gently press and hold and do all that kind of stuff, right? So, because we don't want to increase that pain sensation up to the brain.
No.
So,
and that's also, Nicole, I just want to also say that that's why it's so important as well that women speak up and ask questions around painful intercourse, because even if you're not sure why, if you just sort of keep going because you can kind of handle it, or because you think you should, or anything like that, then you're creating those sort of pathways, because the body, you know, you might be able to handle pain, but your body always kind of keeps score. So
for sure,
that's why it's really important to, you know, ask and bring it up, no matter what the cause of it might be, you know, after childbirth or whatever it is.
Whatever,
just so that we try and get things more quickly, because I know lots of women wait and take a long time to find you. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's I love these things. The other thing that I don't have a example of yet, but I think one's coming, is the O-nut.
I have one here. This is it.
Yeah, so that can also be a really great tool. So that is actually a thing that goes over whatever you're inserting, and it doesn't have to be a penis, people, it can be whatever.
You obviously push it. I was showing all the gynecologists and women at the pregnancy expo, and they were very fascinated by this product, because it also, just like our dilators, they don't look like you would think they would feel, or they don't feel like you think they would until you touch and feel them. So this is just one of the O-nuts over the dilator as an example. It controls the depth, so it's like a sort of like a soft thumper, isn't it?
Yeah. So we definitely recommend that too. So those are like 3 major tools that you can use for your home program, or to practice non-painful intercourse if you're worried that that depth of penetration is really a thing. The one thing that I want to make sure I point out is that I am a big proponent that these 2 types of things are different. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, my physical therapist or my physio said that I can just use my dilator to do the trigger point release. And, you know, that's true a little bit, but most dilators actually are either bendy like this, or they are super rigid and straight and they're not curved. So I am a big proponent of figuring out like which thing is right for the patient, and you might need both for different reasons. So sometimes I'll have people start with the wand, and then progress to dilators, or vice versa. Start with the dilators if you have a problem with the width of this, and they make ones that are skinnier than this too. So I just want to make sure that we talk about that a little bit, because I sometimes that's frustrating. It's like if this thing is straight, then you can't get to where you need to go sometimes. And so you might be missing the muscle that is actually the culprit of the problem. So you got better talk to your physical therapist or your pelvic physio about which is best for you, but just make sure to know that like you might actually need both for different reasons. And we just want to make sure it's optimal for you and the recovery. The other thing, there is a couple of dilator sets that are also good. I mean, sometimes you might have to get a whole drawer full of stuff to get the thing right, but there are we just actually posted on this, right before I got on with you, about how vibration can actually be helpful for intercourse too. So, and this might not be something, this definitely needs, I wouldn't just go out and get a vibrator and like start trying. That is not recommended. But what you should do is know that vibration can actually be really good for nervous system, and it can also be really good for increasing blood flow to the area and helping muscles to relax. It's not necessarily good if you have a nerve irritation right away. So best to definitely ask your pelvic physical therapist on if that is appropriate for you or not. But I definitely recommend that to my patients as well, at the right time in their recovery, because that can be a huge tool in, like I said, increasing blood flow, circulation. It's actually shown to help increase lubrication and just overall sexual well-being. And it can also help with a little bit of libido as well, because a lot of times, it's not weird that if sex is painful, you don't want to have sex. So there can be a lot of reasons for low libido, but one of them can just simply be that it friggin' hurts and you don't want anything in there. And there can also be a lot of hormonal aspects to that as well. And, you know, to be frank too, your relationship can also play a part in that. If it's strained because of painful intercourse, then that can be a factor. And, you know, we are wired differently too. So we have to feel safe and supported and that kind of stuff to get aroused. And then versus men, kind of just seems like it happens real easy. So like that. So except for if there's pain, right? But anyway, so that's just another part to talk about a little bit, is that vibration with arousal, and then looking at and helping your pelvic physio and maybe even your doctor at that point needing to look at reasons for low libido other than simply that it hurts.
Yeah, so and obviously going through all of this as as a patient, you start to know sort of, for a better word, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but what your triggers might be, or the start of what your symptoms, you know, might be. So and I guess that's why it's so important to figure out sort of what your primary drivers of your pain are, so that then when you do have a flare, you don't do sort of what I was doing initially, and it was just like your mind kind of goes, no, like we're right back to the beginning. But now you're empowered with all this with all these tools and knowledge, and you've got your take home sort of I guess management kit with the sole source dilators, or the TheraWand, the ONUT, vibrating dilator, whatever it is that you use, plus maybe your stretching program and your team around you.
Yes.
And do you find that once your patients go through it, that you find that if they do have a kind of a bit of a flare, or they kind of go, I guess, backwards for a little while, that they can come out of it a lot more quickly?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest little talks that we have to have, is that it's so easy to what we call catastrophize, right? Like You've been to the worst places, you've got out of it, and then as soon as something drops down into that worst place, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to go back there. And there's a lot of fear associated with that. But the reality is I always tell my patients, you are in a significantly different place than you were then, physically, mentally, sometimes spiritually. And so it's like, you are definitely in a better place, and your body is now more resilient to change. And so you are going to be able to get out of that faster, and you're recognizing the symptoms quicker too. So that's where we can like really help people come up with a plan. Like we have flare busting plans, we have sex plans, we have all kinds of, you have a plan for what you're going to do the best job you can do to prevent a problem, and the best job you can do to nip it in the bud if it starts to act up, then that's where we can go with that. And in the case of painful intercourse, that's where it's really important to sort of decide and really pay attention to where you're having your problem, right? If you have pain at the very beginning, but afterwards you're fine, then we need to do a lot more work on the front end of having intercourse than we need to do on the back end. On the flip side, if you are totally fine during intercourse and then have a bad flare afterwards of interstitial cystitis or anything like that, then we need to make sure that you're not just doing the sexual activity and then being done. Like that might mean that you need to do, X, Y, and Z, to maybe you need to do the wand after intercourse, which doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but you might need to actually calm down those muscles so they don't get freaked out. If you're having pain during, then what are some strategies that you can do during intercourse? And then if it's all three, a good understanding of your symptoms, the symptom drivers, and then what you can do about each of those things is super important to take control back over your sexual health.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. I feel like everyone watching that has interstitial cystitis or any form of pain with sex is sort of like, damn it, I wish I could see Nicole right now. As you know, you're coming to Australia in August. We're so excited to have you come. Woo!
I know.
And one of our, so you're coming on the 23rd to the 25th of August.
Yes.
And on the 23rd, we are having an information night with some yummy wine and cheese, but more importantly, to chat to you about how we can work as an interdisciplinary team and sort of screen for all of these things a lot earlier.
Yeah, definitely. So we have that pelvic floor screening protocol. It's a series of 10 questions where sexual functioning, painful intercourse is actually, if you want to call it a risk factor or an indicator, let's more call it an indicator that your pelvic floor is involved in your symptom presentation. So yeah, it's a series of 10 questions. If you answer 3 or more of them, then pelvic floor dysfunction is likely and would require and necessitate a referral to a pelvic physio. So yeah, that can be a really great tool for all the interdisciplinary team. And sometimes it really does takes a lot of people, because the other thing we didn't talk about, and this kind of goes for and if you noticed, right, we kind of went from talking about interstitial cystitis specifically to, this is a pretty broad topic that also goes with endometriosis and irritable bowel syndrome and vulvodynia and vaginismus, and all of these sort of pelvic pain conditions can have painful intercourse as a symptom. And so remember that the medical term for painful intercourse is called dyspareunia. But if somebody just says they have dyspareunia, that doesn't really tell us much about why that person has painful intercourse. So anyway, so that's just one of the things that I wanted to also make a distinction about. So, but as a group of pelvic pain conditions, then we still have to figure out the why of the painful intercourse influence. Is it musculoskeletal, or the muscles or the nerves? Is it neuromuscular? The nerves are the primary cause of that. And that's where we kind of need a team, right? A pelvic physio, maybe an OBGYN that specializes in hormones, a pain management doctor. All kinds of different people can help to restore that normal sexual functioning and get you back pain-free. So it is possible. We treat a lot of people with interstitial cystitis that end up being symptom-free or close to it, and that can have pain-free intercourse. So it's possible, and it's actually probable in most cases if you can get to the right help. Yeah, so that's really one of the things we also want to stress, and also that the a lot of times people think that when they go through pelvic physio and they get to a pain-free state or an almost pain-free state, then that's kind of it. And I always are like, well, these little tools that we had you use are your friends for maintenance. And so you can think of these guys as not just helping you through the painful part, but it's also going to help in the prevention area and flare management if that happens also. So
I really am so thankful that you're sharing your knowledge so so openly with us. We really really appreciate it. And I also wanted to say, other than the Friday night that we have with the whole sort of interdisciplinary care, you can, if you're a women's health physio in Australia or New Zealand, you can come and learn off Nicole, who you can see is an absolute guru and has so many sort of tools in her belt of ways that you can look at this condition. So we have the weekend course as well on the 24th and 25th in Sydney. So yeah, make sure that you come along if this is your area of interest, because I know myself going through it, even just talking about, flare plans and everything, you just when you get in a flare, you can't really I found it's really hard to sort of like consciously you do tend to kind of go into that catastrophizing state. You guys,
it just goes to mush. And so I'm like, we need to put this, like, if it's with sex, we put it near your bed. If it's with, like, we put it on the fridge, on your bathroom mirror. Like, this is your plan. Like, this is what you need to do, because everybody forgets. And everybody comes in after a flare, and then they're like, man, this was like the worst flare ever. This sucks. I'm in so much pain. And I'm like, oh, did you do X? No. Did you do Y? No.
Yeah.
No. And it's not for lack of trying. It's just like your brain just goes to a different place of like, basically, oh crap, instead of like, what am I going to do about it? So we got to
total overwhelm. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, so I hope, I don't think anybody had any questions.
No, people were just saying thanks so much. And it's, and I know that Mary from IC Australia was also on board. So
cool.
Hopefully we'll share this as well with everyone. So I'll let you know if we have any big questions, but I'm sure I'll get a few afterwards. And we'll make sure that is there any other sort of thing, any questions from your time in your clinic that you think is very common with women coming through with IC that we haven't kind of covered?
I think the biggest one is this related? And the answer is definitely yes. And then will it go away? And the answer can be yes. And then so you too, even if you have interstitial cystitis, can have a good sex life still. We can help that, and those things are related, and it can be better. So I want to end on like a really positive note that you guys can take control of that. And if your pelvic physio isn't addressing that with you, or you haven't brought that up as a thing, then you can totally get help from them and ask them questions and stuff. So
yeah, totally. So we'll be doing probably, I think it's 2 or 3 more lives probably before you come over to Australia. So if you have any burning topics that you really want to cover, just send Nicole or I either a private message through our Insta pages, PelvicSanity or the Pelvic Hub or Facebook, or you can get in contact with me also on email. We would love to get the message out there and answer any topics or chat about any topics that you guys really want to know about. So thank you so much, and we really look forward to seeing you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will chat soon, and thank you so much.
Hey, bye.
Okay.